Imagine, just for a second, that the only life you have ever known is completely defined by the crack of a whip
Right.
and, the scorching hit of the sun on your back, you, your parents, your grandparents, just stretching back for generations you've all been slaves.
Generational trauma, really.
Exactly. You're in an empire that essentially considers your very existence to be nothing more than like fuel for its massive building project.
Yeah, just cogs in a machine.
And the gods of this empire, they're terrifying. I mean, they are unpredictable, they demand endless labor, but then suddenly, through this series of absolutely catastrophic, world-shaking events, you're free.
Which is mind-blowing.
It is. You walk out of the empire, but the catch is you don't walk into a paradise. You walk straight into a wasteland.
A brutal, unforgiving desert.
Right, a brutal desert, and you are exhausted, you are terrified, and as you sit in the freezing desert night, staring at a campfire, you look around at a million other displaced, traumatized people, and you realize you have a massive collective identity crisis. You are completely unmoored. Like, who are we? Where did we come from? And what on earth are we doing out here in the sand?
It's just the ultimate existential vacuum. And, when human beings are placed in an existential vacuum like that, they need a story to survive.
Yeah, they really do.
I mean, they absolutely need an anchor to reality. Otherwise, everything falls apart.
Exactly. And that is exactly where we are starting today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone, to the show. We are looking at one of the most famous, most heavily scrutinized, and arguably most influential pieces of literature in human history.
The book of Genesis.
Yes, Genesis, which, literally translates to origin or beginning. And our mission for you today is to take this massive stack of notes, historical research, textual analysis, and really figure out what this ancient text is actually doing.
Because it's doing a lot.
It's doing so much. We aren't here to just recount the Sunday school versions of these stories. I mean, we want to understand the mechanics of this blueprint.
Right.
Like, how did it function for the people who first heard it? And why does it set the trajectory for an entire worldview?
Which is exactly why we have to start right there in the desert.
Let's do it.
It is so tempting for modern readers, to open the first page of Genesis and just read it as if it were written as a modern scientific textbook.
Oh, absolutely.
Or like perhaps some purely abstract philosophical treatise composed in an ivory tower somewhere. But the historical setting changes everything.
It changes the whole lens.
Right. Traditionally, and according to the internal logic of the text itself, Genesis is attributed to Moses. It was compiled roughly between 1440 and 1400 BC.
Okay.
So this isn't theoretical theology. This is emergency triage for a displaced people.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this right away. Because if I'm thinking about this, as a listener, my modern brain immediately jumps to a pretty cynical place.
Sure, that makes sense.
I start thinking, wait, so is this just ancient propaganda? Is Moses just inventing this comforting backstory to keep a million panicked refugees from, turning on him in the wilderness?
That is the natural skeptical question. I mean, it really is. But it's actually much more accurate to describe it as identity formation through counter-narrative.
Counter-narrative. Okay, I like that. What does that mean in practice?
Well, the Israelites had spent 400 years marinating in Egyptian culture. Egyptian cosmology, Egyptian ideas about human value.
Right, they were totally immersed in it.
Exactly. So Moses isn't just handing them a comforting bedtime story. He is systematically deconstructing the worldview they had absorbed as slaves.
Oh, wow.
And he's replacing it with the reality of their actual lineage. I mean, they desperately needed to know that the God who just annihilated the Egyptian army and pulled them out of slavery wasn't just some localized, desert war deity.
Right, like some tribal mascot.
Exactly. They needed to know he was the God who actually spun the stars into existence.
That is a staggering paradigm shift. I mean, you are telling a group of people who essentially thought of themselves as human cattle that they actually have a royal lineage.
Yeah, connected to the creator of the cosmos.
It's incredible.
Precisely. And that leads us to the whole backdrop of this text. It represents the dawn of creation, the macro scale of the universe. Because this is the very first move Genesis makes.
Do you mean all the way out?
Right. Chapters 1 through 11 zoom out to the widest possible lens. It is universal history. It covers the creation of the cosmos, the entrance of chaos, and the really rapid, heartbreaking downward spiral of early humanity.
So let's jump into that opening scene. Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Such an iconic line.
It is arguably the most famous opening line in literature. But when I look at the actual text, this thing that strikes me is the tone. Like, there is no argument.
Yep, not at all.
There's no philosophical justification for God's existence. It just drops this massive declarative statement right on your head.
It's unapologetically authoritative. And the genius of Genesis 1 is really revealed when you compare it to the creation myths of the surrounding ancient Near Eastern cultures.
Which those Israelites in the wilderness would have been very familiar with, right?
Oh, intimately familiar. Take the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. In that story, the universe is actually created out of a brutal war among the gods.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the supreme god, Marduk, slaughters the chaotic sea monster goddess Tiamat. He rips her corpse in half and uses her body parts to form the heavens and the earth.
Wow. Okay, so creation is literally an act of divine butchery that is incredibly dark.
It is incredibly dark. And in that myth, why are human beings created?
I'm guessing not for a great reason.
Not at all. They are created out of the blood of a murdered god, specifically to do the grunt work that the gods are just too lazy to do.
So humans are just an afterthought.
Exactly. They are slave labor for the divine realm. Now, contrast that violent, chaotic, bloody origin with Genesis 1. In Genesis, there is no war. There is no struggle. There is just the Spirit of God hovering over the deep. The Hebrew phrase is tohu wabohu, meaning formless and void.
Tohu wabohu. I love how that sounds.
It's very poetic.
Yeah.
And God simply speaks, let there be light.
Yeah.
He brings order out of chaos, not through violence, but through sovereign command.
That is a massive contrast. You go from the universe being this bloody accident of divine warfare to the universe being an intentional, highly ordered masterpiece.
Yes.
Like an architect designing a house room by room. Day 1, day 2, day 3, he creates the spaces, the light, the sky, the land.
All right.
Day 4, 5, and 6, he fills those spaces. The sun, the birds, the animals.
And then we reach the absolute pinnacle of that creation on day 6, humanity. And here's where the text just drops an absolute political and theological bombshell.
Okay, I'm ready.
God says, let us make man in our image, after our likeness.
Ah, the Imago Dei.
Yes, the image of God. To understand how explosive this is, you have to remember the Egyptian context of our audience.
Right, the slaves in the desert.
Exactly. In Egypt, only one person was considered to bear the image of the divine, and that was the Pharaoh.
Oh, wow.
The Pharaoh was the living God on earth. Everyone else was just a cog in his machine. Genesis comes along and radically democratizes divine representation.
That's fascinating.
It declares that all human beings, male and female, the slave, the poor, the weak, are imbued with the absolute, irreducible dignity of the Creator.
So if you are an Israelite sitting in the dirt, wiping the dust out of your eyes, and you hear that it has to fundamentally rewire how you see yourself.
It gives you your humanity back.
You aren't Pharaoh's property. You are God's representative. It's beautiful. But it doesn't last.
No, it certainly doesn't.
The text pivots so incredibly fast from this majestic, ordered paradise into absolute chaos.
Yeah.
We get to Genesis 3, the Garden of Eden, and the famous story of the fall.
Right, Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, the tree, the snake, the whole thing.
The harmony just completely shatters. God places humanity in this perfect environment and gives them a single restriction. Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Okay, I have to stop you here and push back a little bit.
For it.
Because this is the part of the story that drives modern readers crazy, myself included. If God knows everything, he knows they're going to eat the fruit.
Sure.
So why even put the tree in the middle of the garden? It feels like entrapment. I mean, why not put the tree on the moon? Or just not make it at all?
It's a really profound question, and it actually strikes at the very heart of what Genesis is saying about human nature.
Okay, how so?
The text suggests that the goal of creation wasn't to produce mindless automatons or, biological robots. The goal was relationship.
Right.
But genuine relationship, genuine love, it requires the capacity for choice. If there is no alternative to obedience, then obedience doesn't mean anything.
Because it's forced.
Exactly. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents autonomy. It represents the human desire to say, I don't trust the Creator to define what is good and what is bad for me.
I want to define it for myself.
Right.
I want to be the arbiter of truth.
So the bite of the apple or whatever fruit it actually was isn't about a magical piece of food giving them like extra IQ points.
No, not a...
It's a rebellion of the will. It's an internal coup.
It's a great way to put it. It's a usurpation of authority. And the consequences are immediate and devastating. Sin enters the world, and the primary mechanism of that sin is fracture.
Fracture. Like broken relationships.
Exactly. The relationship between humans and God is fractured. They literally hide from him in the garden. The relationship between humans is fractured. Adam immediately throws Eve under the bus and blames her.
Classic.
And the relationship between humans and the natural world is fractured. The ground is cursed.
Which gives us that incredibly haunting quote from Genesis 3:1 time. For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return.
Yeah, that one hits hard. When you think about it linguistically, it's really fascinating. The Hebrew word for the first man is Adam, and the word for the ground or dirt is Adama.
They are literally made of dirt.
Right. You go from being the pinnacle of creation, reigning over the earth, straight back to the dirt. It is the absolute reality check of mortality.
And Genesis is answering the most painful questions of the human experience here.
Like why things are so terrible.
Yeah. Why is the world so broken? Why is there disease? Why is there suffering? Why do we die? The text is arguing that suffering was not the original design.
It's a byproduct.
Right. It's the tragic byproduct of human independence from the source of life.
And what's really terrifying is how fast the contagion spreads. I mean, we move from a literal paradise to the very first murder in a single generation.
It's incredibly fast.
In Genesis chapter 4, we have Adam and Eve's kids, Cain and Abel. Cain brings an offering from the ground. Abel brings an offering from his flock. God favors Abel's offering. Cain gets horribly jealous and just bludgeons his brother to death in a field. It feels like the descent from perfection to psychopathy takes about 5 minutes.
It does feel that way.
Is Genesis just making an incredibly pessimistic, cynical statement about who we are?
Well, it is undeniably dark. It shows that once humanity decides to define good and evil for itself, the baseline drifts incredibly fast.
Yeah.
The etymology of the names even hints at this. Eve names her first son Cain, which sounds like the Hebrew word for acquired or gotten.
Okay.
It's a name of grasping, of possessing. Her second son, Abel, translates to vapor or breath or even meaninglessness.
Oh, wow. Because his life is so short.
Exactly. His life is fleeting. But while it paints a really bleak picture of human capability, the prevailing theme that emerges in Genesis 4 is a tension that runs through the entire Bible.
What tension is that?
The tension between human sinfulness, divine judgment, and shocking divine mercy.
Mercy. How does mercy show up in the very first murder?
We'll look closely at God's response. Cain murders his brother. God confronts him, curses him, and exiles him to be a restless wanderer.
Right. That's the judgment part.
That is the judgment. But Cain cries out and says, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Whoever finds me will kill me." And what does God do?
He protects him. Right.
He puts a mark on Cain to protect him. He promises a sevenfold vengeance on anyone who harms Cain.
That's wild.
God preserves the life of the first murderer. Even in the depths of human depravity, God refuses to let the story end in absolute destruction. He balances perfect justice with preserving grace.
That tension escalates dramatically just a few chapters later with the story of Noah and the flood.
Oh, absolutely.
By Genesis 6, the text describes a world that is so systemically corrupt, so completely saturated in violence, that God essentially hits the cosmic reset button.
Yeah.
The text says God was grieved in his heart that he had made humanity. That is such a vulnerable, painful emotion attributed to the Creator.
It really breaks the heart of God to see his creation tear itself apart. The flood is a terrifying act of uncreation.
Uncreation.
Yes. God allows the chaotic waters, which he originally separated in Genesis 1, to collapse back in on the world. But again, the mechanism of mercy kicks in.
Right, Noah.
We find this profound little verse in Genesis 6:8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
Grace in the midst of a global catastrophe.
Exactly. God instructs Noah to build the ark. And if you think about the ark conceptually, it is essentially a floating Eden.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
It's a microcosm of the original creation. Animals and humans living in preserved harmony while the world outside is totally consumed by chaos.
That's a great image.
God saves Noah, the waters eventually recede, and God makes a universal covenant, a promise never to destroy the earth with a flood again.
And he gives a sign for that covenant.
Right, he places his bow in the clouds,
Yeah.
the rainbow.
The imagery of the bow is incredible to me because a bow is a weapon of war. It's an ancient archer's bow.
Yeah, a deadly weapon.
But God is hanging it up in the sky, pointing away from the earth, pointing toward heaven. He is essentially saying, I am retiring my weapon of mass destruction. Next time the arrow of judgment flies, I will take the hit.
It's beautiful theology.
It is, but it doesn't really fix the core problem because they get off the boat, humanity starts multiplying again, and by Genesis 11, we are right back to rebellion,
Right.
the Tower of Babel.
The problem was never the environment. The problem was the human heart. In Genesis 11, humanity migrates to the plains of Shinar,
Okay.
and they decide, in direct defiance of God's command, to scatter and fill the earth, to congregate. They pool their technological resources, they discover how to bake bricks, and they decide to build a massive tower that reaches into the heavens.
And their motivation is...
They say, let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered.
You know, I always struggled with this story as a kid because, honestly, what is wrong with building a tower? Humans build skyscrapers today. Why is God so threatened by ancient Mesopotamian architecture?
All right, it seems petty at first glance. But God isn't threatened by their engineering skills. A tower of baked bricks isn't going to actually pierce the throne room of heaven.
Obviously.
The issue at Babel is what the tower represents. Historically, this is a ziggurat,
A ziggurat.
a massive stepped temple structure common in ancient Babylon. The top of the ziggurat was where the humans believed they could manipulate the gods.
Like bring the divine down to their level.
Exactly, bring them down to serve their empire. It is the ultimate expression of human pride, self-sufficiency, and empire building.
Oh!
Now, unity, sure, but it's a terrifying, monolithic unity devoid of God's morality. It really is the seed of totalitarianism.
Let us make a name for ourselves. It's the exact same internal coup as the Garden of Eden, just scaled up to a massive geopolitical level.
Scaled way up.
So how does God respond? He doesn't send a flood. He doesn't strike them with lightning. He attacks their communication.
He confuses their language.
Hmm.
The Hebrew word is balal, which actually sounds like the babbling of confusion.
Hence Babel.
Right. Suddenly, the architects can't understand the bricklayers. The project halts. The society splinters, and the people are forced to scatter across the face of the earth, just exactly as God originally intended.
Okay, so let's take a breath, because the narrative pace here is just exhausting.
It's a lot to take in.
In just 11 chapters, we have seen the creation of the entire universe, the fall of all humanity, the first murder, a global apocalyptic flood, and the fracturing of the human race into different languages and nations.
It's epic in the truest sense of the word.
It is. We have been viewing history from 30,000 feet. But the problem is, humanity is now scattered, alienated from God, and broken. How do you fix a fractured world? You can't just hit the reset button again.
You can't. And this is where we hit the most brilliant, jarring narrative pivot in all of ancient literature.
Okay.
The camera has been panning wide across the globe. God's plan to fix the world seems to have shattered along with the languages at Babel. So what does God do?
He doesn't go big.
No, he doesn't choose a powerful pharaoh. He doesn't start an empire. He aggressively zooms in the camera on one random, obscure, elderly man living in Ur of the Chaldeans.
Abram, who later becomes Abraham, which takes us completely out of universal history and plunges us directly into family history.
Right. Genesis chapters 12 through 36.
The era of the patriarchs.
In Genesis 12, God interrupts Abram's life with a completely unreasonable command. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you.
Just pack up and walk away from everything.
Yes. And God makes this monumental promise to him. He says, I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed.
Let's break down the mechanics of this, because this introduces the concept of covenant, which is really the bedrock of the rest of the Bible.
Absolutely foundational.
When I hear the word covenant, I just think of a modern contract, like signing a lease or a loan agreement. If you break clause 4, I get my money back. Is that how God is operating with Abraham?
Not exactly, and this is crucial to understand. To grasp what is happening, we really have to look at how covenants were made in the ancient Near East.
Okay.
Specifically something called a suzerain vassal treaty.
Suzerain vassal. Got it.
When a great king, a suzerain, conquered a lesser king, a vassal, they would make a treaty. The lesser king would swear absolute loyalty and pay taxes, and in return, the great king would offer military protection.
Seems pretty standard.
But to seal the deal, they would perform a terrifying ritual. They would take several animals, cows, goats, rams, slice them completely in half, and lay the bloody halves on the ground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, creating a pathway between them.
That is intensely gruesome. What is the point of doing that?
It's a self-maledictory oath. The lesser king would have to walk barefoot through the blood between the animal halves,
Oh.
effectively saying, if I break this treaty, if I fail to pay my taxes or rebel against you, may I be slaughtered and torn in half just like these animals.
So the burden of keeping the covenant was entirely on the weaker party. If he messes up, he's dead. Okay, so keep that image in your head. Because in Genesis 15, God formalizes his covenant with Abraham, and he uses this exact cultural Monism.
Yes.
Abraham slices the animals in half and waits. He completely expects to have to walk through the blood and swear allegiance, but what actually happens?
Abraham falls into a deep, dark sleep. And in his vision, he sees a smoking fire pot and a blazing torch, symbols of the presence of God.
Right.
And those symbols pass between the severed animals. God walks the bloody path. Abraham doesn't.
That is mind-blowing, that suzerain is taking the curse of the vassal.
Precisely. God is saying, I am making a promise to give you land, descendants, and blessing. And if this covenant is broken, even if you are the one who breaks it, I will take the curse upon myself.
I will be torn apart before I let this promise fail.
Exactly. It is an unconditional, unilateral covenant of grace.
And thank God it's unconditional, because as we read through the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, these guys are an absolute mess.
That's a total mess.
If you're listening to this and thinking, oh, these patriarchs must be flawless, untouchable, moral giants, you are going to be shocked.
Oh, yeah.
Abraham repeatedly lies, telling kings that his exceptionally beautiful wife Sarah is actually his sister, just to save his own skin. He literally hands his wife over to foreign harems out of cowardice.
He does it twice.
Twice. And yet, God continually intervenes to protect Sarah and preserve the covenant.
Right.
The tension in the Abraham narrative isn't about whether he's a perfect person. The tension is about whether he trusts the promise.
Exactly. God promised him a son, a great nation. But Abraham is approaching 100 years old, and Sarah is barren. Every biological clock ran out decades ago.
And they actually try to force the promise to happen on their own terms.
Oh, yeah. Disastrously.
Sarah tells Abraham to sleep with her Egyptian servant Hagar. He does, and she gives birth to Ishmael, which just creates a massive, heartbreaking domestic disaster.
It's so messy.
But eventually, miraculously, God provides the true child of the promise. Isaac is born.
The name Isaac even means laughter.
Right. The laughter of disbelief turns into the laughter of joy. Isaac is the physical embodiment of everything God promised. Which brings us to arguably the most difficult, horrifying, and complex chapter in the entire book. Genesis 22.
The binding of Isaac.
The binding of Isaac.
The Akida. God comes to Abraham and says, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering.
Okay, I have to be the voice of the audience here because this is the point where a lot of modern readers just throw the book across the room.
And understandably so.
This sounds like divine child abuse. It sounds like the terrifying gods of the surrounding nations who demand human blood. How are we supposed to read this without being entirely repulsed by the God of Genesis?
Well, you are supposed to be shocked by it. But you really have to read it in its cultural context to understand the test.
Okay, what's the context?
In ancient land of Canaan, child sacrifice was a dark, horrific reality. The worship of gods like Molech involved literally burning children alive to secure agricultural prosperity.
That's horrifying.
It is. Abraham lived in a world where the ultimate proof of religious devotion was the willingness to slaughter your own child.
Okay.
So God is putting Abraham to the ultimate test. Do you trust me as much as your neighbors trust their false gods? Do you love the provider of the promise more than you love the provision itself?
So Abraham saddles his donkey. He takes Isaac. They walk for 3 days. And, I mean, the psychological torture of those 3 days is unimaginable.
Oh, agonizing.
They climb the mountain. Isaac, who is likely a young man at this point, realizes they have the wood and the fire, but no animal. He asks his dad where the lamb is.
And Abraham says God himself will provide the lamb.
Wow.
And Abraham binds Isaac, lays him on the altar, and raises the knife. He fully intends to obey. He actually believes, as the New Testament writer of Hebrews later theorizes, that God is capable of raising Isaac from the dead.
That's incredible faith.
But right as the knife is coming down, the angel of the Lord calls out, Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy.
The relief is just palpable.
God intervenes. He provides a ram caught by his horns in a thicket, the substitute. What God is doing here is immensely profound.
Right.
He is speaking the language of Abraham's culture, asking for the ultimate sacrifice only to emphatically reject it at the last second.
So it's a statement.
A huge statement. He proves Abraham's faith, but He simultaneously draws a massive eternal line in the sand, separating himself from the gods of Canaan.
I am not a God who desires the blood of your children.
Yes, I am the God who provides the substitute.
That changes the entire reading of the text. It's actually a repudiation of human sacrifice disguised as a test of faith.
Precisely.
So Isaac survives, he grows up, he gets married, and he has twin boys of his own. Esau, the older, hairy outdoorsman, and Jacob, the smooth, calculating indoorsman.
Quite the contrast.
And if we thought Abraham's family was dysfunctional, Isaac's family is a masterclass in toxicity.
It really is. Isaac favors Esau. His wife, Rebekah, favors Jacob. It's a house divided. And the central conflict revolves around two things: the birthright and the blessing.
Can you explain the mechanics of that? Because to modern ears, fighting over a birthright sounds like kids arguing over who gets dad's watch when he dies.
Right, it sounds trivial.
What was actually at stake culturally?
In the ancient patriarchal system, the birthright was an enormous deal. The firstborn son received a double portion of the family inheritance.
Okay, so a lot of money.
Money, land, flocks. But more importantly, he became the head of the family, the patriarch. He assumed judicial and religious authority over the entire clan.
So it's about power.
Utter power.
Yeah.
And the blessing was a spoken prophetic decree by the dying father that essentially enacted the legal transfer of this power.
Like reading the will.
Yes, but it carried immense spiritual weight. To lose the birthright was to lose your economic future. To lose the blessing was to lose your identity.
And Jacob, whose name literally translates to heel grabber or deceiver, wants both. And he is perfectly willing to destroy his family to get them.
He's ruthless.
First, he catches Esau coming in from a hunting trip, absolutely starving. Esau dramatically claims he's going to die of hunger. Jacob won't give him a bowl of red stew unless Esau swears away his birthright.
It's extortion, really.
It is. And Esau, driven completely by his immediate appetite, sells his future for a bowl of soup.
It's a tragic study in instant gratification versus long-term value.
Yeah.
But Jacob's deception doesn't stop there. Later, when Isaac is old, blind, and dying, Jacob and his mother Rebekah conspire to steal the final spoken blessing.
This part is so wild to me.
Jacob dresses up in Esau's clothes, puts goat skins on his arms to simulate his brother's hairy skin, and blatantly lies to his blind father's face.
I am Esau, your firstborn.
Yes, he steals the blessing.
And when Esau finds out, he vows to murder Jacob as soon as their father dies. The family completely fractures.
Just blown apart.
Jacob has to flee for his life across the desert completely alone back to Mesopotamia to live with his uncle Laban. He leaves with nothing but a staff. He is a fugitive.
And he spends 20 years in exile. He meets his match in Uncle Laban, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Laban is an even bigger con artist than Jacob. Laban tricks Jacob into marrying his older daughter Leah before he can marry his true love, Rachel.
Old switcheroo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jacob is deceived, manipulated, and worked to the bone. It is a long, painful period of cosmic irony and poetic justice. The deceiver is constantly deceived.
But slowly, through all that hardship, God begins to humble him.
Yes.
Jacob ends up with 4 wives, 12 sons who will become the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel, and a massive amount of wealth. And eventually, God calls him to return home.
To face the music.
To face Esau.
The climax of Jacob's story happens the night before he is supposed to meet Esau. Jacob is terrified. He sends his family and all his possessions ahead of him across the river Jabbok.
Because he's all alone.
He is left completely alone in the dark, and suddenly, a mysterious man attacks him. They wrestle in the dirt until daybreak.
This is one of the most bizarre and beautiful scenes in the Bible. Who is he wrestling?
The text reveals it is a divine manifestation, often interpreted as the angel of the Lord or God himself taking human form.
Jacob is literally wrestling with God.
As dawn approaches, the divine figure strikes Jacob's hip, permanently dislocating it. But Jacob, clinging to this figure in agony, says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me."
What a shift. I mean, this is the same guy who stole a blessing through lies and goat skins. You know, broken, limping, stripped of all his tricks, he realizes the only blessing that actually matters is the one that comes directly from God.
And God asks him, "What is your name?"
Oh, I love this part.
Remember the last time he was asked that by his father, he lied and said, "I am Esau." Here, in the dark, he finally confesses his true nature. Jacob, the deceiver.
He finally owns it.
And God responds, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." Israel literally means he struggles with God.
I love that so much. He struggles with God. That is the name God gives his chosen people, not the perfect ones, not the ones who have it all figured out, but the ones who wrestle.
Yes.
It gives you so much permission to doubt, to question, to be messy in your faith. God isn't looking for pristine behavior. He's looking for people who will hold on to him in the dark and refuse to let go.
It is the ultimate picture of the covenant. God continues to use this limping, flawed man to carry forward the promise, which sets the stage perfectly for the final sweeping act of the book.
Right.
Genesis chapters 7 through 50, the story of Joseph.
This is where Genesis stops reading like a series of disjointed folklore stories and turns into an absolute masterpiece of literary plotting.
It really reads like a novel.
It does. The Joseph narrative is tight, suspenseful, and emotionally devastating. It takes all the family dysfunction we just talked about and turns it up to 11.
Way past 11.
While brilliantly solving the geographic problem of how the Israelites eventually ended up in Egypt to become slaves in the first place.
We begin with Joseph, one of Jacob's 12 sons. Jacob, who you would think had learned his lesson about the dangers of parental favoritism, blatantly favors Joseph over all his older brothers.
He just repeats his dad's mistakes.
Exactly. He gives Joseph a special garment. Modern adaptations always call it a coat of many colors, thanks to the musical. But the Hebrew likely means a long-sleeved tunic.
Which is a crucial detail. What does a long-sleeved tunic mean in an ancient agrarian society?
It means you don't have to work.
Ah.
Think about it. If you have long flowing sleeves, you can't shear sheep, you can't harvest grain. It was the garment of the managerial class.
So Jacob is essentially parading Joseph in front of his older, exhausted, hardworking brothers, saying, this teenager is the boss.
No wonder they hated him. And Joseph doesn't help his own case.
Not at all.
He has these prophetic dreams where his brother's sheaves of grain bow down to his sheaf, and the sun, moon, and stars bow down to him.
And he just tells them.
He cheerfully reports these dreams to his brothers at breakfast. He's arrogant, naive, and entitled.
And that toxic brew of favoritism and jealousy finally boils over. The brothers are out tending the flocks, far from home. Joseph comes to check on them, wearing his special tunic.
Of course.
They see him coming from a distance, and they plot to murder him. They strip him of the tunic, throw him into a dry, empty cistern, a pit in the desert, and literally sit down to eat lunch while he screams for his life.
The callousness of that detail is chilling. Eating lunch while your teenage brother begs from a hole in the ground.
Ultimately, the oldest brother, Judah, convinces them not to kill him, but to profit off him.
Right.
A caravan of Midianite merchants is passing by on their way to Egypt. They pull Joseph out of the pit and sell him into slavery for 20 pieces of silver.
So dark.
They take the long-sleeved tunic, dip it in goat's blood, and present it to their father, Jacob, claiming a wild animal devoured him. Jacob is utterly destroyed. He refuses to be comforted.
Meanwhile, Joseph is dragged in chains to Egypt, completely stripped of his identity, his family, and his privileged status.
Right.
He is sold to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard.
But the narrative introduces a theological refrain here that echoes through the rest of the story. The Lord was with Joseph.
Yeah.
Despite the absolute catastrophe of his circumstances, Joseph proves to be exceptionally competent and completely faithful. He rises to become the head of Potiphar's household.
Until he is falsely accused of attempted assault by Potiphar's wife.
Right, because he refuses her advances.
He refuses her advances because of his integrity, and his reward for doing the right thing is being thrown into the king's prison. A dungeon.
He goes from the pit to slavery to the dungeon. It's a relentless downward trajectory.
Yet again, the text repeats the Lord was with Joseph. Even in the dungeon, he rises to administrative prominence. And it is here that his God-given ability to interpret dreams becomes the mechanism for his salvation.
The dreams.
He interprets the dreams of two of Pharaoh's disgraced officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. Joseph predicts that the cupbearer will be restored to his position and begs him to remember him when he gets out.
But the cupbearer forgets. Joseph rots in that dungeon for 2 more agonizing years. I mean, how do you not just give up on God at that point?
It's the crucible of his character. God is breaking down the arrogant teenager and building a statesman. And the timing is perfectly orchestrated.
How so?
Because 2 years later, Pharaoh himself has a pair of terrifying, inexplicable dreams. 7 fat cows are eaten by 7 gaunt, sickly cows. 7 healthy heads of grain are swallowed up by 7 scorched, withered heads of grain.
I want to pause on the Egyptian context here. Why is Pharaoh so freaked out by a nightmare? In Egypt, dream interpretation wasn't just a parlor trick, it was a massive state enterprise, right?
Absolutely. On neuromancy, the interpretation of dreams was a highly formalized science in ancient Egypt. The priests had massive manuals, literally books of dreams mapping out symbols and meanings.
Like a state religion.
Dreams were considered messages from the gods, often dictating state policy. When Pharaoh's entire brain trust of magicians and wise men cannot interpret the dream, it is a catastrophic failure of the Egyptian religious apparatus.
And that's when the cupbearer finally remembers the Hebrew slave in the dungeon.
Right.
They pull Joseph out, shave him, dress him, and rush him before the most powerful man on earth. Pharaoh says, "I hear you can interpret dreams."
And Joseph's response is incredible. He doesn't take the credit. He says, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires.
He completely bypasses the Egyptian gods.
He bypasses them and asserts the sovereignty of his God.
Joseph interprets the dreams. He tells Pharaoh that Egypt is about to experience 7 years of unprecedented agricultural abundance, followed immediately by 7 years of famine so severe it will wipe out the memory of the plenty.
Yeah, a total collapse.
And he doesn't just offer an interpretation, he offers a policy proposal. He advises Pharaoh to appoint a discerning man to tax the grain during the 7 good years and store it in reserve for the 7 bad years.
And Pharaoh looks at this 30-year-old former slave, recognizes the Spirit of God in him, and essentially hands him the keys to the empire. He takes his signet ring off, puts it on Joseph's finger, and makes him the vizier, the second most powerful man in Egypt.
Wow.
And if we are asking how a foreigner could achieve this, historically, this aligns fascinatingly with the Hyksos period in Egyptian history, where Semitic peoples actually rose to high administrative power in the Delta region.
Oh, that historical resonance is powerful. So Joseph executes the plan. The 7 years of plenty happen. He stores massive amounts of grain. And then the famine hits.
And it hits hard.
It doesn't just hit Egypt, it hits the entire surrounding region, including the land of Canaan.
Which brings this story full circle. Back in Canaan, old man Jacob and his sons are starving. Jacob hears there is grain in Egypt, so he sends 10 of his sons down to buy food.
But not all of them.
Right. He keeps his youngest son, Benjamin, Joseph's full brother, Rachel's only other child, at home, because he is terrified of losing him like he lost Joseph.
The 10 brothers arrive in Egypt and bow face down before the vizier, begging for grain. They are bowing down exactly as Joseph's childhood dream predicted decades earlier.
It's incredible.
They do not recognize this terrifying Egyptian official speaking to them through an interpreter, but Joseph recognizes them immediately.
And this is where Joseph begins this elaborate psychological game of cat and mouse. He doesn't reveal himself right away.
Why? Is he just being vindictive? I mean, is he getting revenge?
It's deeper than revenge.
Yeah.
He is testing them. He needs to know, are these the same callous, wicked men who ate lunch while I screamed in a pit, or have they changed?
Ah, okay.
So he accuses them of being spies. He throws them in prison for 3 days, giving them a taste of what he experienced. Then he releases them, keeps one brother, Simeon, as a hostage, and demands they return to Canaan and bring their youngest brother Benjamin back to prove their story.
And he secretly puts all their money back in their grain sacks. When they discover it on the way home, they are terrified. They think God is punishing them. The guilt of what they did to Joseph 20 years ago is eating them alive.
They eventually return with Benjamin. Joseph throws them a feast. But then comes the final, ultimate test.
The silver cup.
Yes. As they leave to head back home, Joseph secretly orders his personal silver cup to be hidden inside young Benjamin's sack of grain. Shortly after they leave the city, Joseph sends his guards to arrest them for theft.
Oh, man.
They search the sacks, and the cup is found with Benjamin.
The horror they must have felt.
Joseph declares that the rest of them can go free, but Benjamin must remain in Egypt as his slave. This is the exact scenario that played out 20 years ago.
The exact same choice.
They have the opportunity to abandon Rachel's favorite son to slavery and save their own skins. Will they do it again?
And this time, they don't. Judah, the very brother who originally suggested selling Joseph, steps forward. He gives the most impassioned, heartbreaking speech in the entire book.
It really is.
He explains how much their father loves Benjamin, how the loss of his other son Joseph destroyed him, and how losing Benjamin will put Jacob in the grave. And then Judah says, "Let me stay as your slave in the boy's place and let him go back to his father."
It is the ultimate act of repentance and substitution. Judah offers his own life for the brother he once would have betrayed. When Joseph hears this, the dam breaks.
He can't hold it in anymore.
No. He orders all the Egyptians out of the room. He breaks down weeping so loudly that the rest of the palace hears him, and he speaks to them in Hebrew. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?
You can't even imagine the terror in that room. I mean, the man they sold into slavery is the most powerful man in the world, and he has them completely at his mercy. They are expecting a bloodbath.
But instead of execution, he offers grace. He embraces them, and he reframes the entire horrific 20-year nightmare through a theological lens.
Right.
He
Yeah.
says, "Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you."
He tells them to go get their father, their families, all their flocks, and migrate down to Egypt. Pharaoh gives them the best land, the region of Goshen.
It's a total reversal of fortune.
The family is reunited, they are saved from the famine, and Jacob finally dies in peace, surrounded by his sons. But after Jacob dies, the brothers panic again.
They think, now that dad is gone, Joseph is finally going to take his revenge.
They throw themselves at his feet. And Joseph gives them the answer that serves as the absolute linchpin for the entire book of Genesis.
Genesis 50:20. He looks at his terrified brothers and says, "Ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive."
I want to park right here because this introduces the massive concept of providence. And providence can be a really tricky concept to wrap your head around.
It certainly can.
Does this mean God forced the brothers to be evil so he could do a good thing? Did they have free will, or were they just puppets in God's play?
That is the ultimate philosophical paradox, and Genesis navigates it brilliantly.
Mhm.
Joseph does not excuse their sin. He explicitly says, "You intended to harm me."
So they are guilty.
Their actions were wicked, malicious, and entirely their own choice. They are morally culpable. But providence is the idea that God's sovereign will is so vast, so incredibly robust, that he can take the messy, chaotic, evil choices of free human beings and weave them into a tapestry of redemption.
Like a master artist.
Think of it like playing chess against a grandmaster. You are completely free to make whatever move you want. You can try to attack, you can try to cheat,
Right.
but the grandmaster is so superior that he incorporates your chaotic moves into his strategy, ultimately guiding the game to his inevitable checkmate.
So God doesn't author the evil, but he hijacks it. He meant it for good. The brother's betrayal, Potiphar's wife's lie, the cupbearer's forgetfulness, all of those individual threads of failure were woven together to position Joseph to save the known world from starvation.
And more importantly, to preserve the covenant family of Abraham.
Yeah.
And if you bring it all the way back to our starting point, that audience of terrified Israelites in the wilderness, this changes everything. They had been asking, if God promised Abraham the land of Canaan, why did we just spend 400 years as slaves in Egypt? Did God fail?
And the end of Genesis says, no, going to Egypt wasn't an accident. It wasn't a failure of the promise. It was a providential rescue mission.
Exactly.
Egypt was the incubator where the family of 70 people could be protected and multiply into a nation of millions. Genesis gives the Israelites in the desert the crucial backstory to their existence.
We have covered an immense amount of ground. If we pull back from the narrative and synthesize the blueprint we've uncovered, there are really 5 massive foundational pillars holding up this text, and by extension, the rest of the Bible.
Right. If you are a listener trying to hold all this in your head, here is the synthesis. Pillar 1, God as creator. The universe isn't a violent accident. It is ordered, intentional, and sovereignly governed. Humanity is made with inherent dignity in the image of God.
Pillar 2, human sinfulness. Genesis is brutally honest about human nature. The moment we try to seize autonomy and define good and evil for ourselves, the world fractures. We see it in Eden, in Cain, in Babel, in the deceit of the patriarchs, and the cruelty of Joseph's brothers.
Pillar 3, judgment and mercy. God takes evil seriously. She judges rebellion. But woven into every act of judgment, the exile from the garden, the mark of Cain, the ark and the flood, is an astonishing, unmerited grace that preserves humanity.
Pillar 4, covenant. God commits himself to fixing the fractured world to a specific family. And this promise rests entirely on his faithfulness, not on human perfection. He walks the bloody path of the treaty alone. He wrestles in the dark with the deceiver.
And finally, Pillar 5, providence, the unseen, steady hand of the Grandmaster, the assurance that even in the darkest dungeons of human experience, when evil seems to be winning, God is quietly orchestrating salvation. He means it for good.
When you look at those 5 pillars, you realize you aren't just reading ancient folklore. You are reading a highly sophisticated theological framework that explains the human condition and sets the trajectory for everything that follows.
It's so deep.
It tells anyone reading it today that their lives, however chaotic they seem, are part of a massive ongoing story of redemption.
It is breathtaking. We started with 1 million displaced people in the desert needing an anchor, and Genesis gives them an anger that plunges all the way down to the foundation of the universe. But as we sign off today, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, slightly provocative thought to turn over in your mind.
Let's hear it.
We just celebrated how the book of Genesis ends. It ends with a beautiful reunion. The family of Israel finds safety, salvation, and full bellies in the land of Egypt. Thanks to Joseph's providential rise to power, Egypt is their sanctuary from a deadly famine.
Right, a happy ending.
But if you know the rest of the history, you know the profound irony of what happens next. Centuries later, that exact same place, that beautiful, prosperous sanctuary of Goshen, would gradually morph into the site of their bitterest, most brutal slavery.
It's a tragic cycle.
The pharaohs who knew Joseph died. New regimes took over. The Egyptian refuge became an Egyptian prison. And it would become the very empire they needed the Exodus to escape from, launching them into the terrifying wilderness where this book was compiled.
It's that haunting perspective.
It forces you to look at your own life and human history and ask a really tough question. How often do our greatest places of refuge slowly, imperceptibly become our greatest traps? The job, the relationship, the ideology, the institution that saves us in one season can subtly enslave us in the next. And when that happens, we are forced back out into the wilderness, requiring a completely new deliverance and a whole new beginning. It reminds us that in this life, the search for true, permanent safety is never quite finished. We are always pilgrims. Keep digging into your sources, keep asking the hard questions, and keep looking for the deep mechanisms that drive the stories that shape our world. Thanks for joining us